Language dominance. Now, let me remind you what we are doing is that we are challenging certain assumptions that underlie our concept of bilingualism and our understanding of bilinguals. One concept is that of language dominance. Now, what is language dominance? Language dominance would mean that bilinguals are more proficient in one language and they might than other languages that they might know. Now, this is a psychological construct and it is often tested through certain tests that try to see how quickly or how late would you react to certain response given in a language. And they also test the translation speed from one language to the other. So when you have this concept of dominant bilingual, you would have this person who is able to translate from one language quicker than that person is able to do that in another language. And his or her reaction or response in one language is quicker than the other language. However, these speed reaction tests have been challenged by sociolinguists. Please remember that psychologists come from a different discipline and your sociolinguists come from another discipline. When the psychologists are looking at things, they are looking at brain functioning and they isolate themselves from the social context within which language is being used. When the sociolinguists are looking at, they have lesser eye on the brain processes. They are looking at the social context that is affecting the use of certain languages, and they look at reasons why a person would be more proficient in one language rather than the other. And Fishman, a great name in sociolinguists, argues that this kind of test is irrelevant and might only be used if bilingualism is being practiced either as a hobby or as an occupation itself, like as if you are acting as an interpreter or a translator. Only then these tests might be more useful. So the objection is that dominance of a language in a certain function is possible. So we are saying that yes, in a certain function, in doing something, one aspect in social life, you might feel more comfortable in using one language, and in performing some other function, you might be more comfortable in performing in another language. The point is, there might not be just one dominant language that is dominant in the performance of all functions. There might one type of language, for instance, Urdu, you might feel it more comfortable when talking to friends or talking to parents or talking to, explaining things to yourself. And you might feel more comfortable in English when you're talking to someone within an educational context, and when you're talking about also certain academic related matters, you might find it more comfortable. So what we are saying is that language dominance is task specific. It is difficult to say which language you're more proficient in, because you're proficient in one languages for certain functions, and for the other functions, you might find that other language that takes dominance. And then, of course, there is this thing to keep in mind, that bilinguals constantly translanguage. Now, because we are focusing so much on translanguaging, so this emerges in all our assumptions. So all the assumptions that we challenge, we keep on reminding you about this concept of translanguaging. Now, this concept of translanguaging, let me remind you, is a considerably later a new concept, and it is also not a concept that is readily accepted in academic institutions. But for teacher education, it is important to understand that these paradigms through which these lens through which we are looking at bilingualism is changing. So the objection to all these tests used for language dominance, another objection is that language dominance can be tested only if bilinguals are used to or forced to use only one language. So you force a bilingual to use one language to perform different types of tasks. And if a person is not able to do it, so you sort of like say, all right, you are not dominant. Not dominant in this language. You perform more dominantly in the other language. But the choice of the tasks, really, because it is done by the researchers, might be just a coincidence that the person who is being evaluated is better in the chosen task and not in, or a person might not be good in the chosen task in terms of the use of that specific language. And again, because this is the main thing that we are challenging, the problem is that we are using monolingual standards of language proficiency to test bilinguals, when we are constantly saying that bilingual use of language is completely different and they need to be viewed with a different heteroglossic lens in which you accept that they use two languages or three languages almost as if they are using one huge repertoire of all these different languages. So they need to be tested differently.